So let's start off with your first experience with telemark skiing and how you heard about it, how you got into it.
Oh, okay.
And then yeah, give me some background on that when that happened and what it was like.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess my first experience with tele was when I was back in Michigan, still going to school in Ann Arbor, and my buddy Zeke. We were skiing in the Arb. We'd go there for fun, and we'd go sledding or something like that. And he shows up one day. We did a lot of cross-country skiing there, but it was hilly. And he shows up, and he's got these metal-edged Rossi Descents, and he starts, doing this fancy turn. I'm like, oh, what the heck is that? It's a telemark turn. It's, it's what they do. Okay. That was like 1980. And so another buddy and I, we tried to emulate that with our Nordic cross-country skis with low-cut boots, and it was pathetic. It was hideous. We couldn't telly. No way. But we tried. And then we tried doing it once on a trip out to Jackson Hole. We did a cross-country day, and we headed out towards the Tetons. And it was mostly a cross-country tour, but then we headed up at this one point up the hill a little bit, and we tried to make telly turns with our Nordic skis, and that was pathetic too. But we tried, and it was fun, and so that was cool. Then I moved out to California, and started doing the same thing. Went out cross-country skiing, and I went out into the San Gorgonio Wilderness, and I'm looking at all these hills, mountains. I'm from Michigan. These are mountains, and I'm just like, I gotta find something that allows me to use this cross-country stuff and go downhill. And I wasn't thinking telly at all. Okay, not at all. In fact, next year I figured out what it was. It was Raymer binding. It was AT. That was the answer. And so I started. That's when I became a fanatical backcountry skier and just started going off on AT. And my buddy Zeke ended up moving out to California. So a couple years later, he calls me up and says, I'm coming out to law school, and we got to get together and go skiing. I'm like, oh, yeah, man, you got to get some AT gear. He's like, no, I'm telly. I'm like, no, you got to have AT, because the stuff we're skiing, you can't ski with that wimpy telly gear. And we went on a couple tours together, and dang, he was able to get down the same stuff. But he wasn't able to style it as good, but he could get down it. So when was it? It was like 86. I decided, well, if he can do it, then I got to do it. So that's when I started trying to find some telly gear. So I just bought it in pieces. Got some. I got those red sleds on a deal, and then I had to wait for some boots, and then there was some solo extremes. There was a super deal on it, Sport Chalet, and they were returns, and they had to be resold. So they were only like $60. So I bought those, and that's when I started tellying. And I would just go out and I would telly at the resort, and I would telly until my legs couldn't take it anymore, and then I'd go back to Alpine. And I did that for like a year and a half, starting in 86. And then Zeke and I went up to Mount Bachelor for Christmas vacation, Christmas 87. And by the end of 4 days at Mount Bachelor, I was able to telly the whole day. And so then it was time to come home. So we headed down, and we got to Mount Lassen. It was New Year's Eve, and the idea was we were going to go celebrate New Year's Eve on Mount Lassen. There had been like 2 feet of fresh that fell. And I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I got my AT gear in one hand, I got my telly gear in the other hand, and I got like a 50-pound pack. Monstrous thing. And I'm like thinking, I'm probably good enough telemarker now that I'll really enjoy the skiing in the backcountry. But I don't think I can handle it with a full pack. And he's like, no, you can handle it. You're fine. You're going to be okay. I'm like, but I don't want to waste 2 feet of fresh. He's like, you're fine. You're going to be okay. So we went in. I decided to go with telly. And we went in, didn't set up the tent till like 3 in the morning. Got up the next day, I don't know, crack of 9. Finally made it to the summit about 1:30 or something like that. And started down on the south face. And it was just not working, man. I'm like thinking, oh, I should have brought my AT gear. And then, just this little voice was like, it's powder. Let go. Stop trying to control it. Just let go. And that's when that's right. I can ski, I can handle it. And I just let the skis run with the fall line. And started porpoising, face shots. When I got to the bottom of that run, that was it. I mean, I haven't looked back. I've been a telemarker ever since.
You and I have talked a little bit about telemarking being sort of a dance and the comfortability of the gear. Tell me a little bit about, from that first experience to now, what is it like? What is it about telemark? What are a couple of the things that really stick out in your mind about telemarking as a snow sport versus these other things?
Well, okay, yeah. I guess to rephrase your question is it's now that all the gear has progressed, and I don't consider myself as much a telemark skier as a backcountry skier first and foremost, but telemark is my preferred mode of travel, and the main reason is it's just the whole soulful experience of tele. Skiing with alpine gear is about power and control and what you can do and all that. And you can have all that with tele, but there's this finesse element, and it's a dance. It's not just making turns. It's absolutely a dance. I mean, I always say that I curtsy when I turn, because that's essentially what you're doing as a telemarker. But it's because it's not solid and rigid, and everything is it's a flow. And that applies to the whole sense of traveling in the backcountry. But with AT, it's more, the flow is about how you move through the mountains. And with tele, flow is everything. It's not only the path you take and how you wind your way up, it's how you wind your way down. Like when I first started teleing, I tried to emulate turning like an alpine skier. So I was always trying to make as many turns as possible, and I'd always ski a line and just wrap around the line. And then I took up snowboarding for about 4 years, and by my second year mixing in snowboarding, my tele turns totally changed. It went from like that to I was seeking out little terrain pockets, and I would milk the terrain to bank a turn. And you don't see that much with alpine skiers. They still tend to they drive a line. But tele, you're dancing on your skis and with the mountain and with the terrain, and you make it flow. And sometimes you'll knock off 4 turns really fast, and sometimes you'll just sweep out. And, it's just totally different.
What year exactly did you start telemarking?
86.
86. Tell me a little bit about the climate of, maybe not the climate, but the people surrounding the sport at that time. And what you were seeing in terms of who was telemarking in 1986. What did it look like here in California?
Okay, yeah, well, that's interesting, because where I came from, I got involved in a group in the Sierra Club called the Alpine Ski Touring Committee. And their whole premise was they were backcountry skiers on alpine gear. But then I converted to tele. And most of the people in the group, it was like no big deal. And there was another group in the Sierra Club, the Ski Mountaineers section of Los Angeles, which was a very large group of backcountry skiers. And they were predominantly telemarkers. And ASTC was predominantly AT. In fact, we had bylaws, you had to AT. But I was kind of like the big promoter, and I had switched to Tele, so Tele became this thing that was acceptable, and we were, within our little group, we were the rebels because we were Tele in an AT group. And most of the people I was skiing backcountry with at the time, were on AT gear. There was Emerys at the time, Ramers. There was a Fritchie that was unlike anything that's on the market now. Anyway, not many people. Most people were still AT, but Tele was definitely growing, and it was the mode of skiing that had cachet, and a lot of that came from Carter and Bard, from them doing the Red Line Traverse, and from them they were going out and doing slideshows and basically turning people on to the whole backcountry experience. But their emphasis was that you can do this, and Tele is the way to go because it was lighter weight, and it was lighter weight. But they were lying a little because they said it was easy, and that was total bunk. It's hard. It was hard then, and it's still hard now. It's harder than alpine skiing. But they were right that it just, and they didn't say this, but I think this is it. It's because it's a more sensual turn, because it's a more, because it's harder, because you have to be more committed to it to make it enjoyable, that the reward is that when you get it, it's more enjoyable as well. So they were right about that. And so what happened is, as I got better in Tele and as I started doing it, I started running into more people who were Teleing. And I think the main thing that was different back then was we were very obvious on the hill at a resort. Because honestly, we weren't very good. We were as good as you could be at the time, but our hands were up, and I mean, there's just limits to how well you can control a ski with a leather boot, and they were skinny skis by modern standards. And so whenever you would see people on the hill at a resort, like if we were going up the gondola at Mammoth, people would look at us and they'd realize, oh, those are those guys with those leather boots. And then they look out and then they see someone flailing down the hill trying to Tele. And they'd look at us like, why do you want to do that to yourself? And, it was like, well, I hope we don't look as bad as that guy. But anyway, we try and explain because it's more fun and it's more of a challenge. And we couldn't really explain much more. But that was what we said, because honestly, we weren't that much better than those guys, but it was more fun. We were having a great time. The other thing, and you don't know this when you're in it, but it was a small community. So, like at the time, like when I saw Carter and Bard, these were just a couple of yahoos. And I remember when I first saw them speak, and they're. I remember Tom Carter going, and this is the binding, and it's easy. And I was AT at the time, and I'm thinking to myself, you liar. It is not easier, and Ramers are way superior, but his enthusiasm was super infectious. And here's the other thing. Okay, now, we tend to think of Carter and Bard as, oh, these guys, that they pioneered all this stuff. And they did. They totally did, okay? But it was new for everybody. That was the thing. That no one really knew what the limits were. And it was like this amazing thing when we learned that Bela Vadas had skied the U-notch and then the V-notch on Telemark gear. And then he had a shot of him skiing shootout. And I remember the first time I skied shootout on Tele gear, I had Kazama cornices. And I'm taking pictures and I'm telling my buddies, hurry up, because my skis are so skinny, I can't even hold my position on the slope. It's 53 degrees, and I can't even hold my position because my skis are so narrow, and all I got is leather boots. And, the first time I skied the U-notch, it was in leather boots. And we were pushing limits. And it was a really small community, everywhere, and there wasn't many of us, but yet we all kind of like, we always knew somebody who knew Carter. We always knew somebody who knew Bard. We knew somebody who knew Doug Robinson. And then I met Doug Robinson. It's like, oh wow, I met Doug Robinson. And it's, you know, it's no big deal. He's just a Joe, all right? He just happened to be a writer, and he's into this thing too. And so we were actually spinning in our own little circles and rubbing elbows with people we didn't even know we were rubbing elbows with until later on. It was like, oh yeah, I remember, yeah, I skied with that guy. It's like, well, you ski with so-and-so? Yeah. I mean, no big deal. Like Dave Braun. He's skied all kinds of wicked stuff, okay? And he was one of the local Joes in our area, and he's an awesome skier. And I skied, you know, probably the most wicked line I've ever skied with him ever in my life, the Giant Steps Couloir in Williamson. But, you know, he's just another guy. A badass, but just another guy. And so that was something that was very cool that we didn't really recognize at the time because it was such a small community.
How did Couloir play into this whole thing, and when did that start? Why did it start? And how did some of these characters play into that whole thing?
Well, Couloir grew out of a recognition on my part that I needed to do something else, and skiing was my life. And what happened was I was involved with the ASTC, and there was us, and we were kind of the breakaway group from the Ski Mountaineers section. And the Ski Mountaineers section had all the people, and almost all of them were telemarkers. And we didn't have that many people, and I started a newsletter to just as a way to connect with people and to motivate them to join us on our trips, so we'd have more people on the trips, have more fun. Okay, that's all it was about. And it started out twofold. One, as a way to, as a newsletter for our club to attract new members. Okay, and it was also it came about because I'd made a commitment in '88 that somehow I was going to get out of what I was doing as a job, and I was going to get published as a photographer and a writer. And I sent a bunch of photos off to Powder Magazine and Skiing, and all got rejected. No one liked any of my stuff. And so I was like, man, if I'm going to be published before the end of the year, it ain't going to happen. I'm going to have to do something different. So that tied into me starting the newsletter. And at the time, I just loved to ski couloirs. I just loved to ski steep stuff. So it was Le Chronicle du Couloir. That was the name of the newsletter. And I just started it as a way to fulfill my commitment to myself that I'm going to be published. Pretty meager, but okay. But I was published and sent it out to like 50 people. And after about the third issue, I realized that actually it was costing me whatever, $5 in postage every time. Whoa. So I asked for donations, and people sent them in. I couldn't believe it. One person sent in a roll of stamps. It was like, whoa. So that was when it kind of clicked. People are actually reading this. And that's when I started to dream. And it just serendipitously, the same year that I started that was the year that I made the full switch to telly. And actually the whole purpose of Couloir was not to promote Telemark at all. It was to promote backcountry skiing, and quite honestly, my initial goal was to, over time, be able to explain and show people that telly is inferior. You want to go in the backcountry, get on AT gear. Do not waste your time on telly. Do not learn a new turn. Do not buy all new gear. Do not flail your way down the hill, because that's stupid. Just take what you know, change your binding, get some skins, go enjoy the backcountry. That's where it's at. I mean, it took 15 years for people to go, oh, Right. I don't have to telly. But in the meantime, during the 90s, because telly had the momentum, telly was the way people thought they had to get into the backcountry. And with the development of plastic telly boots, all the focus, because that's what was new, was on telly. And so backcountry grew in America through Telemark. And Couloir promoted that because I wasn't stupid. It's like, that's what most people are doing. So we're going to talk telly.
Going off the plastic boot thing, what was it like at that time when people went from leather boots and plastic came into the picture? What did that do for people, and how did people react to that?
It's pretty funny. People got pretty divisive over leather and plastic. And I mean, I wrote many, I made as many jabs as I could against plastic. And, I would say that I was not going to move over for plastic because, the leather of cow was not dead yet, and nothing equaled the smooth flex of leather. And I would say almost nothing still does, but they really improved the product, and you can't argue the difference in downhill performance. And that was the one thing that we all wanted as telemarkers. We loved the telly turn, but we wanted to be able to ski the rad and not be shaking in our boots all the time. We wanted more control. And we knew we wanted fatter skis, but we couldn't control them. And so plastic was the answer to that. But the first Terminator, it worked, but it required such an adjustment to your stance and to your technique that those of us who'd been doing it for a while, we were like, no, that's not how you telly. I shouldn't have to change how I telemark to use this new gear. But we've since learned, no, that's just what happens. You get new gear, and if you have to make some adjustment to your technique, you do it. As long as you get other performance advantages, you do it. So my telly turns now are totally different than what they were 10 years ago. And those are different than they were 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So it's all this change. Like now that NTN's out, everyone's like, is it better? Is it worse? Well, you got to change your technique. Yeah. So what? Does the change in the technique give you the results you want? If they do, then go for it. If it doesn't, then don't. And so, I think all the developments in the gear have all been largely positive. And, it allows more people to do it, and it allows us to ski things that before we only dreamed about skiing. And now we're just like, well, yeah, why not?
So what's the future of Telemark, to kind of wrap this up? In your mind, if you could see Telemark 15 or 20 years from now, or even 30, since it kind of came back into the picture, what do you think it's going to look like?
Oh, man, I think telly is going to continue to grow. Right now, and in 2010, it appears like it has stalled. And that's just because it no longer is perceived or recognized as the bridge into the backcountry. People know you don't have to telly to go in the backcountry. And most people just want to go in the backcountry. So now, telly attracts people who want to telemark more for the sake of that telemark experience, which is a more sensual turn, and something that requires more skill to master. And I think it still has a cachet now, but it's not the most popular, hip, cool thing to do. I mean, most people, they're expedient. They're just like, look, I just want to go out of bounds. So what's the quickest way to do that? AT, okay? But there is a group of people, and there always will be, people who are athletically inclined who are like, no, but I want to know what is the best way. And I don't know if telly's the best. I think it is, okay? But that's a personal preference, and I figured it out. I've been doing it for a while, and I'll admit it's not easy, but I mean, when I make parallel turns, there's nothing there. So, okay, turn. I want to make a telly turn. This is what a lot of people ask me, you know, why, what is it you like about the telly? And there's this sweet spot in any turn on snow or in water or something like that. There's a sweet moment, a magic moment, okay? And in alpine, it's maybe that big. And in snowboard, it's like that. And in telly, it's whatever you want. It can be really huge and it can be really tight. You can make it whatever you want. But the sweet spot is more dynamic and it's deeper and it's wider. That's what I like about it.
All right, Craig Dostie, why do you still Telemark ski?
Why do I still telly ski? Well, so we turned off the camera. I'll just rewind for folks. We got talking, and here's the thing is I got into telly because I was into backcountry skiing. And you got into telly for the turn. But I got into telly because telly was a versatile way to enjoy the backcountry. And when we went to resorts, it was just to learn how to telly better so that when we were standing at the top of some couloir in the backcountry, we could manage to ski down it, okay? And now all this gear is improved. Telly gear is improved, AT gear is improved, and all the things that telly used to be famous for, lighter weight, more versatile, all that stuff. AT holds all the aces for that now. So if AT is the superior way to go in the backcountry and I'm a backcountry skier, why am I still a Telemark skier? Comfortable shoes. That's why. Telly boots are like slippers compared to AT Frankenstein boots. That's the main reason. And I can do the telly turn and they can't.